All righty. We are going to give folks just a few minutes to jump on, but I see people already joining. It is nearly 6 o'clock on the East Coast. We're going to get started around 6:02. As you join, please make sure to introduce yourself in the chat. Change your settings to all panelists and attendees. Then let us know who you are, where you're coming in from. If you're a candidate for office or working on a campaign, give us a little more information. It's so good to get to know who is joining these calls every week. I am excited. Tim's got his nice background set up. I have my, weekly brick wall toaster oven plant that's dying behind me. It's going to be fun. Hi, James Farnsworth, candidate for school board in St. Paul. So glad to have you. Again, as you're joining, it's around 6 o'clock now on the East Coast. As you are joining, we would love to introduce yourself. Please say hello in the chat. Just change your settings to all panelists and attendees. We're going to get started right around 6:02, so in about 90 seconds or so. Give people a few more minutes to join. But I am really excited for tonight's thrilling conversation on online ads and all things running through the mind of Tim Lim, but mostly online.
Oh God. Yes, just yeah, mostly online ads. The other parts.
We've got Laura DeVoe from Newton, Massachusetts, who's a digital volunteer for the Marquee campaign. Let's go. Ben Dalton, exploring a run for Los Angeles City Council. Genevieve Corsi, a candidate for state rep in South Windsor, Connecticut. So excited. Kristen Powers, a candidate for Alamance County Commissioner in North Carolina. I'm so excited to see you again, Kristen. Sonia Brookins, a candidate for Soil and Water Conservation District 4. Sonia, let us know what state you're coming from too. That's always really helpful. And again, as folks are joining, please make sure to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, where you're coming in from, if you're a candidate for office, what you're running for, and we are so excited for tonight's conversation. I know we're also now live on Facebook, so if you're watching on Facebook and you have any questions or comments, please do drop them in the comments on the post. We'll be pulling from there for questions throughout the hour. I'm going to give people another 30 seconds or so to jump on, since I know there's a lot going on today, but I am really excited to have tonight's conversation about Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Hulu, online ads, display, programmatic, search, everything running through Tim Lim's brain. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. We're going to learn a lot. If you have specific questions that you already have in mind, you want to make sure we get to, please drop them in the Q&A function down below. But do not hesitate to ask what's ever on your mind.
I also have breaking news on the advertising front that I will break it when we get to, oh, Brad Bauman, thank you. Thank you for that. I will, when we start, I will break the news. It's regarding Facebook and it's ad targeting. They just made an announcement.
Amazing. I can't wait to hear the news and for you to interpret it for us. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Tonight is our, could be 7th, could be 8th, who knows, Armchair Chat. This is part of Run for Something's summer-long series, trying to give you the information you need to run the best possible campaign, whether you're a candidate, a staffer, a volunteer, thinking about running one day. We want to make sure that you have all of the resources you need to be successful, and we're doing this for free. It has been a wild year, feels like it's been a million wild years. But the fact that we're able to do these at all summer long and into September is because of the support of some of our incredible partners. So I want to thank Act Blue, Ask Me, Authentic Campaigns, Fireside, Claire and Stephen Crouppen, Onward Together, Yelp, Precision Strategies, and Planned Parenthood for their sponsorship and for their generosity with Run for Something. They have made this all possible. If you are watching on Facebook or if you're watching tonight on the Zoom, I want to make sure that you get your questions answered. If you can, drop your questions in the comments on Facebook or drop them in the Q&A function here on Zoom. I know folks will also be participating in the chat, and if you are doing so in the chat, please change your settings to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see. The topic for tonight's conversation is online ads, and I am thrilled to have one of the foremost experts in the industry, Tim Lim, who's also delightfully a Run for Something board member and friend. He is one of the best in the business, and we are so thrilled to have him to join us to really learn what's on his mind. I want to toss it over to him so that he can answer, sort of level set and lay the groundwork for what's going on. And then from there, we'll be opening up to your questions. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Amanda. And sorry that multiple Tim Lims are joining. I sent my link to a bunch of people and I realized that I sent the panelist link. So my bad. That's technology in 2020. My name is Tim Lim for everyone on here. Excited to be on with you all. I have a couple of different hats that I'm really excited about. I think the one that I'm most excited about is as a board member run for something and raising money for Run for Something. And so for the folks on this call, I'm going to make the hard ask, which you all have been doing, I think, for your campaigns. But for those who are not running and can give, please give to Run for Something, because the work that Amanda and Ross and team are doing, it's not just foundational. It's going to really be setting up the success of the progressive movement for the future as well. So yes, please help out and chip in if you can, because that's first of all, one, as a board member, that's the first thing I'm going to ask everyone to do, and second, tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about what's going on online ads. I told you that I had some breaking news from Facebook, so I'm going to be happy to get that announced to the folks on this call, and then hopefully be able to ease some of your pain points, because I know that specifically digital advertising is a pain point for a lot of folks that are running for office today, especially during a pandemic. So just a little bit about myself. As Amanda mentioned, I've been doing politics for a little while, and specifically been doing digital advertising for a little while, but I started off in field. That was where I got my political chops in. One of my first jobs was a field organizer for Howard Dean in New Hampshire in 2003, and knocking on doors in Concord. At that point, I was a college student from California, knocking on doors during the winter in New Hampshire. And that's where I started cutting my teeth in politics. Worked on a number of different campaigns after that, gubernatorial, congressional, etc. And then realized that I needed to make a living, and I needed healthcare, and I needed things that at that time were really, really important to me. And so started doing consulting, and worked in a number of different firms. Worked for Steve Grossman up in Boston for a while, worked for change.org, and that was kind of where I started my digital my digital engagement. After that, started a firm called Precision Network, and then became a partner at Bully Pulpit Interactive, which is one of the largest digital advertising firms in the country. And then after that, started a number of different firms, was a co-founder of Newco Strategies, and also started a creative firm called the Hooligans Agency. So I am really into identifying vacuums in our industry and being able to fill them, and being able to push the envelope in terms of what we should be doing, how we should be doing it. And I think that, when we talk about digital and we talk about advertising, really I hate using the word digital, because today it's just media. Today it's everything, right? Like your TV screen is digital. Your Spotify is digital. Whether it's radio or audio, whether it's TV or digital, all of it's media. And I think that the more we get focused on that mindset and that approach, the more successful we'll be as a party and as a movement, as campaigns, because one, that's how the other side looks at it first. That's a really big point. And two, we can stop these stupid wars that are happening between, do I spend money on TV? Do I spend money on digital? Do I spend money on mail? No, we're spending money on media, and how do we get the most impact? I think that was my five. I don't know if I clocked in at 5 minutes, Amanda, but I gave a rant, and so I'm happy to extrapolate on that.
No, I think that's a really good level. I think one of the things that we hear from a lot of our candidates is that their budgets are small. They might have $100, they might have $1,000. In a big race, they might have 10,000 or 50,000. as you think about these different scales of budgets that candidates are working with, knowing that there's a lot of known unknowns as part of this, how do you recommend candidates think about allocating their money towards paid spending?
Yeah, this is a subject you're going to get a ton of different advice and feedback on, depending on who you've hired, depending on who's on your team, and depending on the scale of your campaign. There's obviously economies of scale that you have to appreciate. What Joe Biden, for instance, is going to run from an advertising standpoint. It should be different than what a local campaign is going to run on digital. But there are certain base foundational pieces that you're gonna be up on, and that you should be up on, and that there's going to be an ROI to it. So, for instance, when we talk about digital advertising, the go-to that most campaigns are gonna be at right now when you start off, or if you're running, is going to be on social media. It's going to be on Facebook. For whatever, listen, I'm going to kind of take the moral question of Facebook out of this, because I can spend hours on that topic. From a campaign standpoint, Facebook is going to be a very crucial tool in terms of being able to in terms of being able to really fundraise, in terms of engaging voters, in terms of being able to mobilize volunteers. So there's going to be a ton of different aspects that Facebook is good for. And so my suggestion when I talk to campaigns, no matter what scale we're talking about, is start with social media, start on Facebook, because it's low cost, it's efficient, the targeting is pretty good. And by the way, the breaking news that I should say is Facebook has just disabled some ad targeting options. As I'm talking about the targeting, you will not be able to target likely race on Facebook. So likely Black voters, or likely Hispanic Latino voters, likely Asian voters. You will not be able to do that moving forward. And so you're going to have to get more creative in terms of how you're going to be structuring your ad programs. But Facebook is you're going to start there, and then you kind of build up from that, right? So you're going to think about, okay, well, what's going to raise me dollars? What's going to get me votes? What's going to get me volunteers? And there's going to be a variety of different platforms and tactics that you're going to be going towards. But the places where I usually recommend folks to start off with is look at Facebook, look at Google Search. Google Search is a really high quality, high return on investment platform in order to get both volunteers, donors, etc. on board. And with Facebook, by the way, also comes Instagram. I just pointed that out. And then once you get past, if you get past that, right, and that's if you're raising and spending six figures of dollars here. If you're raising six figures, this is when we start talking about all the platforms, Amanda, that you had mentioned. We're talking about programmatic, we're talking about pre-roll, we're talking about video, we talk about all these pieces. At that point, you want to have someone on staff that knows what they're doing, that has some experience with advertising, that gets it, that you're not just hiring an agency and kind of just doing it that way. I think you want someone internally that knows what's best for you. And that's, we start talking more complex things like, we're talking pre-roll, 15, 30-second pre-roll. That's the video ads you see everywhere. We're talking about, voter targeted advertising, which is targeting specific voters and households. We talk about, sentiment tracking and being able to see what the impact the campaign has. I think you get to that point though, like I said, you need to beef up the staff, you got to beef up the experience and the expertise. But before that, you have Google Search, Facebook, start there, and then move on.
Okay, there's a bunch of things in that I want to dig in on to get specifics. But first, Brad Bauman dropped in a question, and within those allocations and knowing that every campaign is different, how would you recommend campaigns generally structure digital spend between acquisition and persuasion over the course of a month, or course of a year, excuse me? And
yes,
in answering that, you can also define the terms, because I know we had a lot of folks here who need online ads, so that would be very, very helpful.
Yes, thank you for checking me on the acronyms. I, on a daily basis, use way too many acronyms, and it is very annoying. So there's two types of advertising that we, from the industry standpoint, that we talk about. There's acquisition, and then there's persuasion. And acquisition is really just it's a placeholder for fundraising. And so different tactics and different target audiences, right? So when we talk about acquisition, you're going after hardcore supporters. You're looking for the most likely donors of your campaign, so folks who are going to be likely to convert. Once they join your email, once they've following you on social media, they're going to start taking actions. The persuasion audience is totally different, right? These are people who are on the fence, who know about you, but they're not sure. They're still making up their minds. And so the tactics that you're using on digital to get to each of these folks, the messages that you're using are going to be completely different, right? Because for acquisition and fundraising, it's going to be more red meat. It's going to be what gets people to want to put their credit card information in and donate. For the persuasion audience, you're talking about specific issues. You're talking about your opponent. You're talking about what you're going to do when you get elected. I mean, there's going to be pieces that are different. There might be some similarity trends, but for the most part, these programs are going to look fairly different. So let's start with acquisition, because for a lot of the folks on this call, you're probably, this is something that you're going to be doing, year round. I mean, from the minute you launch your campaign all the way going into election day. And so what this basic acquisition that basically is that you're trying to get people to sign up for your email list. You're trying to get them to take actions on behalf of the campaign. Amanda, this is your world. I would say even more than mine. So stop me if I veer off into weird categories. But there's a couple rules of thumb with acquisition, which is that one, you always want to start earlier. The earlier you can start on acquisition, the more likely that you're going to get ROI, because it's kind of like an investment. You're investing these dollars in now, getting these names in. The earlier you can get them in, the more times they can donate to you, and the more times that they can actually give. So, by the way, I realize now there are multiple Tim Lims that I'm really starting to. I'm going to have to ask them to both sign off and go on to the other link that I've sent. So acquisition is really important, because for a lot of campaigns and movements, it is it's the lifeline of your budgets. It's where you're able to raise the most dollars, and you're able to get it's what's fueling a lot of those grassroots donations you see from folks. So that's where you want to be targeting likely Democrats. You want to be targeting progressive Democrats. You want to be targeting likely liberals on social media. It's where you're going to be targeting folks who are fans of yours and who want to get more involved. And you want to do that on the earlier side, making that investment in so that it's going to pay off later on. So like I said, if you're from the minute you're launching, right, the longer the longer runway you have, the more likely you're going to get the returns. General rule of thumb is that you want, in terms of when you're going to reach covering the cost and then net positive, it's somewhere between 3 months to 6 months, somewhere around there. You might have quicker returns depending on your campaign. Every campaign is different. These are just basically general rules of thumb. But it takes 3 to 6 months. If it takes longer than that, that means that program really did not work. And then you want to go from there, every dollar that's coming in from the program is a net positive. So that's why we say start as early as you can, and then see how it's performing, see what messages are moving people, and then that gives you the ability to actually expand the acquisition program, raise more and more dollars. I don't know if that covered, hopefully that covered all of that.
Can you talk a little bit about the calculation to hire someone, to bring on a consultant, to do it in-house, knowing that most of the people on this call tonight are very small campaigns. Their budgets are probably pretty minimal. And corollary, actually, I'll get to my follow-up in a moment. Answer that question.
Okay. I gave a little bit of these rules of thumb in the beginning, and this is very general, right? There's no specific formula here. But I think generally, if you're approaching, six figures of spend, if you're looking at a total digital advertising budget somewhere around $100,000 or more, that is not something I would tell you to do on your own. I don't do that on my own, right? I mean, I have a team that that helps support and implement. So I think that's generally where I say, okay, that's something we got to talk about and really be able to start, thinking how do we bring on an agency or bring on senior staff who can help to run this. Because I'm looking at that from a monthly spend, right? So not that you're going to spend $100,000 in 1 month, which I mean you might in some cases, but that would be like, okay, if you're spreading that out, and that means you're spending an average about like $8,000 a month or something over a year. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of money when you aggregate that. So that's some place where I say if you're looking to, when you're looking at your budgets and you're looking at what the returns are, you're going to get more returns if you bring on someone senior if you're going to spend that kind of money. Now, if you're spending less than that, right? So if you think you're going to be spending, $25,000, here's some of the math that you should think about. One is most agencies charge a media commission when you do these ad buys. Okay, so they're charging, in these cases when we talk about these budgets, they're going to be charging 15% with minimum spends. So 15% of 25. That's a significant amount of dollars that are going to be going not towards your ad program, but towards, the consultant fees. Now, as these budgets get bigger, the margin utility obviously is not as much as if you have a budget that's smaller. So that's why when we talk about, how much you can do this on your own versus how much you want to bring on somebody, my suggestion is there's tons of learning materials and processes to be able to do small scale programming, right? To be running, several $100s a month, but that gets people engaged, that gets people fundraising, that gets people on your email list. There's a margin of utility to like how you get those dollars spent. And so you've got to really look at the budgets. And I'd say that if you're approaching $8,000 a month per spend average, or if you're looking at a total aggregate budget of $100,000, then yeah, it's time for you to bring on someone senior.
If a person was trying to run ads themselves, where do they go to learn these things? So
there's lots of different resources here. I think Run for Something has good resources on its pages in term for opportunities for candidates. There are partner organizations that do this on a regular basis as well. National Democratic Training Committee, NDTC, the Arena. A lot of them have a lot of good materials. I'd start with the platforms. The platforms themselves are the best place to go to first to look for these materials. Facebook, for instance, has a wealth of training materials and Q&As and processes. So start with the platforms first because, listen, they actually want you to spend money, right? They actually want you to be able to do this successfully. So go there, take the lessons from there first. And then if you're asking yourself, okay, I want something that's a bit more specific to political and progressive campaigns, then go to other resources as well to learn. But start with the platforms and then expand out to these other places where there are really good platforms to be able to to learn and to be able to get more information from.
I want to remind folks that if you're watching in the Zoom, to please drop questions you have for Tim in the Q&A, and we'll pull from there. If you're watching on Facebook, feel free to comment any questions you have for Tim about online ads and really anything else, and we will get those there as well. I want to talk a little bit about a question that has come up a bit in a couple of the other Armchair Chats we've done. Is it ethical to give Facebook money right now? How do people balance that challenge, that sort of quandary at the moment?
Wait, I thought I said I could divorce those two things from this call. Listen, this question comes up probably every week for me, personally, and I think professionally. But you kind of, like I said, you kind of have to, you do have to kind of break this out into two different components. I think, when I think during the primary, when I was watching Elizabeth Warren's campaign, go on their anti-Facebook messaging. I looked at the FEC report. They were still, they were spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on Facebook, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because it's providing a platform to engage with our voters and our donors in a way that no other platform's allowing it to. You can use a platform to achieve your goals and also still be able to criticize it and fight for it to be better, right? Because I think, you know, what should not happen is just to give up and also put ourselves at a disadvantage, right? Because that's the key point of this, is that it's not just, you know, you're not just taking a moral stand, you're going to be taking a moral stand that will actually hurt. Like, it will actually hurt your campaign to not be on there. So my suggestion is look at the ends that we're trying to achieve and look at the ultimate goals that we want to achieve, which is to win. We want to win, and we want to pass better legislation that's going to help lots of people. And the only way to be able to do that and to not take money in from, you know, in massive donations, which, by the way, that's just not something we're really good at, and so we shouldn't try playing this game. But in order to do that, we do need to rely on platforms that allow us to be able to engage grassroots donors. And Facebook, you know, frankly, is just probably the best at this point that allows us to do this. Same as Google search, right? And we know that there are massive problems with both of these platforms, and we need to, but we're going to keep fighting for justice. We're going to keep fighting for them to correct those mistakes.
I agree with you. The thing that I've come back to is that even the organizations that are pushing the boycott on Facebook are also spending money on Facebook because they understand that it is imperative to achieving their mission. There's some really interesting questions coming into the Q&A. So I want to go to a couple of these. First, anonymous attendee wants to talk a little bit about the utility of using a lookalike audience after uploading a custom audience. Does that offset the people you lose from not having cell phones? Is it better used in a commercial setting? Can you just talk a little bit about lookalike audiences and broadly targeting on Facebook in particular?
Yeah. So lookalike audiences, basically what that is, it means that you're asking the platform, you're asking Facebook to find an audience that's similar to the one that you're targeting, right? So let's say that you uploaded a list of emails. So you can upload a list of emails and target those specific individuals on Facebook. You can do that also with cell numbers, addresses. There's a number of ways to target individually. If you feel like, okay, the audience that I'm targeting on Facebook, that's not big enough. Like that when I look at the voter file, that's only covering, 15 or 20%. I want to go after a larger audience. Then you can turn on lookalike targeting, the algorithm will basically allow you to allow Facebook to find people that resemble the demographics and the behavioral targets of the folks that you're targeting. There's a lot of risk to that as well, because you're targeting it using an algorithm that you're not entirely sure what exactly they're using to do it, but you're trusting it. So I think when it comes to lookalike targeting, you want to use that after you've exhausted the initial round of targeting. And I think we've kind of got, as a movement, as a party, as an industry, we've gotten kind of lazy. I'll be frank about this. We've gotten lazy about how we build media plans, about how we are targeting, about how we're reaching folks. If any of the folks here have an agency on board or have seen a media plan, you probably have seen line items that say voter targeting, or we're going to target these specific voters. That's one-to-one voter targeting using cookies and user ID information. That only covers like 30% at most of your target audience. And so you got to think about ways to engage your target audience that are a bit more creative. You got to think logically, and you got to build think logically, and you got to build profiles of who these people are that you're trying to reach. And it's not as hard as people think. I think we've forgotten how to think about the target audiences that we're trying to reach, the voters trying to reach, and what they're reading, what they're consuming, what are they going to be going to online? How are we going to reach them? That's the type of targeting that we should be thinking about, not just relying on algorithms or voter file targeting and say, okay, this is the person I'm trying to target, so that's it, and that's all I need to do. It's like, no. If you're trying, for instance, if you're going to target, if you're going to target color, communities of color, if you're just targeting immigrants, if you're targeting liberals, the people on this call just think about your everyday life, right? Think about what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're consuming, right? Are you going on Breitbart? No. Are you, are you going on Fox News? Probably not. Maybe you are. I mean, I'm not gonna make value judgment. Probably not. So think about, when you're thinking about this stuff, it's like, okay, what sites are they going to? What things are they liking? What are the groups that they're joining? And just use some common sense when we're targeting. If you like Barack Obama and you like Hillary Clinton, then you are probably a likely Democratic donor and volunteer, right? Like, I didn't need an algorithm for that. I didn't need, Facebook to help me find that. I can do that on my own. But that's my point, is like, we need to just use a little bit more common sense when we're doing this targeting, because, I'm seeing all these complex, like, modeling and behavioral targets. I'm like, folks, like, at the end of the day, if you like Barack Obama, you like Hillary Clinton, you like Joe Biden, I'm pretty damn sure that you're a likely Democratic volunteer or donor, or you're a crazy bot, right? But I mean, if you are a crazy bot, you're not gonna like click through and donate money. So that's the point of this, is that we have to use some common sense, think about it a little bit more logically, and then you get to these really complex things like lookalike targeting and modeling and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think one thing it's worth any candidate or campaign on this call keeping in mind tonight is that very little of this is rocket science. There's a lot of lingo and a lot of jargon that is going to be used to explain it, to make it feel more difficult than it is, so that you feel like you have to pay someone. But as Tim said, unless you're spending 6 figures, you can absolutely figure this out yourself. And as Tim just very thoughtfully and passionately explained, the targeting that you're doing is common sense. It will, especially if the volunteers, the staff, the people you're turning to for help come from the communities you're trying to reach, you can do this yourself. Tim, another question from Nahal. How do you define success in a persuasion campaign? Acquisition makes sense, when you're tracking if someone takes an action. How do you know if a persuasion ad is successful?
$1 million question. Literally, it's $1 million. If you can solve it, then I think that you'll make $1 million. I think that, right now everybody says that they have a way, or they found ways to do this. It's a lot of pseudoscience. It's a lot of like Cambridge Analytica and all this stuff. I mean, there are tools, right, that you can be running on the front end to see whether or not this is a good ad, or whether or not this is moving sentiment. It is true that you should not be looking at acquisition metrics to see or to decide if a persuasion ad works well, right? So if something gets a lot of clicks, that doesn't mean that it's persuasive. Okay, because when you're clicking on something, you're taking an action. That action doesn't mean I like it, or I think this is, or I hate it, right? It just, whether it's a acquisition ad, you're gonna convert into a donor, that's one thing. But if you're targeting a persuadable audience of folks who are on the fence, clicks, it's really hard to be able to take that and say, okay, that means they really, really like it. My suggestion is this: when you're thinking about making ads, and when you're thinking about putting up something, and when you're thinking about posting something, I generally have a rule for all my candidates, for all the programs I run. You have to have a 2-person rule. Okay, so there's 2-person rule. Like, just because you think it's great, you want to make sure that somebody on your campaign or on your staff takes a look at it, and then you post it. So that's a basic thing that will help to decide whether or not this is going to be a good thing or not, right? So always have a 2-person rule when you're posting on social media. When we talk about advertising, we talk about videos, we're talking about all the stuff. You want to, like I said, you really want to think about it from a target audience standpoint. So you do want to talk to folks who are generally representative of the people in your community, or people that are on your campaign who resemble the folks that you're trying to reach. And you want to show them the ad, get their feedback. I mean, do your informal focus group, do an informal, get informal feedback. That's, these are all things that sound really basic and easy, but you'd be surprised how many folks do not do this and just put the ad out there, or they run a complex online panel to see whether or not this ad moved white moderate voters between the ages of 45 to 60. There are surveying platforms that can help you. Facebook has a tool called Brand Lift. Google has their own survey tool to be able to do a treatment control universe survey to see whether or not people are moved or people are not moved. This is for budgets, frankly, that are like $500,000 and above. I mean, like, and Frank, I'm still not entirely convinced of the efficacy of a lot of this, because, if it's a good ad, you kind of know. If it's a bad ad, you kind of know. And it's the folks around you, if they're smart, and if they're not yes people, right? If they're competent and smart and they're not yes people, they will be able to put together a program that's going to be able to influence the voters that you need. But it goes back to one of the questions about campaign manager, how to find a campaign manager. That's probably another $1 million question. But I mean, if you have a competent team around you that wants you to succeed and wants you to win, then listen to them and get their feedback.
There's a really interesting question here from Kristen Powers, who I know is running in North Carolina. She keeps hearing about.
Oh gosh.
I know. Vote builder integrations, APIs, and all the other lingo. What does that all mean? And more importantly, how does a small campaign, like one for a county commissioner, take advantage
of it? I think we talked. Amanda brought this up, and I completely agree. Those are the type of things that get you to just spend more money. And I'm not entirely sure, like, if it's effective. I just was on a call yesterday where a very small nonprofit was being sold on a relational organizing platform, and and I'm like, okay, well, like, how many people are going to volunteer, and what are you going to have them do? And they said, oh, well, we're looking at 30 people, and they're going to do phone banking. I'm like, well, okay. You don't need a relational organizing platform. That like you know what I mean? Like this is you have to realize, it's like when you're going shopping, right? If you're gonna buy a car, if you're gonna buy something that's really expensive, you have to use the same type of judgment and logic skills that you have when you're buying those purchases as when you're making big purchases on your campaign. And so if it sounds too complex and you don't understand it, and the people around you don't understand it, then it probably means you don't need it. And it probably means that all you're doing is wasting money. And so VAN and Vote Builder and API, these are very important terms. They're very important acronyms. I'm not going to say that they're not, but this is where we talk about economies of scale and programming and growth. And it's if you're spending $500,000 to $1 million, let's get into this, right? Let's really get into the specifics of what's going to be, integrating with so VAN and the Vote Builder is just basically, it's a voter file, right? Let's just call it the voter file. It's digitized, it's put into a database. Let's talk about how we can, take in, voter contact scores and put them into the database. And the API is what allows us to do that from one end to the other, and creates a feedback loop. But I think what I see so many times, and it makes me so angry, is one of the reasons why I'm on the board of Run for Something, because I'm passionate about what the organization's doing, and I'm passionate about winning on the local level, is that you see companies and firms trying to just rip off local candidates and take all their money, and then if they lose, they go, well, you just didn't do it right. Well, I mean, how about you shouldn't have sold your crazy thing in the first place and made them spend, $5,000 to $10,000 a month on this stupid thing that wasn't necessary at all to win, right? It's about starting from the basics and starting from the foundation. And once you've covered all that, once you've done the hard work and you did all that, then go and then think of it as like the add-on, right? It's the add-on. It's not the base and the foundational work. The base and foundation work is going to be voter contact, working your ass off more than your opponent, right? And knowing what your community stands for, knowing what your community wants and the changes that they want, and being attuned to those changes and fighting for them. I mean, that's the basics of campaigning haven't changed, right? In whatever, hundreds of years. And the more we think platforms or data or apps can fix that or can solve it, the less likely that we're going to win. right? I mean, that is the end point of the day. So when they start throwing acronyms at you and they start throwing out terms, and you're like, but how does that help me win? You know, if you feel that in your gut and you feel that in your head and you're like, this doesn't make sense, then most likely it doesn't make sense.
Are there any tools besides, the basic platforms of Facebook, Instagram, search that you think smaller campaigns, let's say state ledge or below, should consider or take a look at?
Tons of platforms, not on the advertising side, right? I think I focus more on, I focus a lot on the advertising, but there are tons of platforms that can help to make your programs probably easier or ease some pain points. So I do a lot of census organizing work, and we just did a whole webinar series for local and small nonprofits on how to utilize free tools or how to utilize apps, free apps, where you're able to connect teams and be able to build upon that. Google is probably you want to start with Google and really look at all the things that they have to offer. G Suite does have opportunities for smaller groups and nonprofits where they offer the tool sets for free. But yeah, being able to access Gmail, being able to access email like that, that's going to be huge, right? Slack is a great way for your teams to be able to communicate with each other. It will become a pain at some point, and you're going to be like, why did I download this on my phone? But it's a great way, especially in a pandemic, for folks to be able to talk and communicate with each other. There are free video conferencing options. Zoom, at least, still has a free video conferencing option where you're able to video conference with each other or do a video teleconference if you want. Microsoft Teams, right, also has some free options as well. So there are platforms and there's software that can help you campaign, that can help you build better teams, better campaigns, etc. But look at it constantly from an ROI standpoint, right? It's like, if I invest X amount, what am I getting for it? What's like the actual tangible benefits of doing so? If you're talking about, 25, 30, 40 staffers, yes, then it makes sense to upgrade to a paid program on Zoom or on Slack. If not, look at the ROI of what you're getting first. Look at those the free platforms that allow you to take advantage of these. And then we start talking about more expanded options. Action Network is a fantastic platform for emailing email fundraising, because they charge you basically by how big your list is. And if you don't have a lot of folks on your list, and you don't pay any money. NHP Van is also a great platform. It's more expensive, but they also have the ability to be able to upload your list and to be able to email them. All of this is going to say is, look at everything through the lens of logic and common sense first. Just how you'd be looking at your own budget at home, right? Just as you're looking at your monthly budget when you're setting out and you guys spend money on X, Y, and Z, on food, on utilities, on TV. The same way you'd be looking at that is the same way you should be looking at your campaign.
Really interesting question from Tommy Rosencrantz. Is there such a thing as too much advertising? And I think if you can touch on that, and really, if someone is thinking about launching a campaign in 2 years, or if election day is 2 years away, how do you think about the life cycle of your spend over the course of, say, from 2 years out to election day?
Well, I think from an acquisition standpoint, it's never too early. And I think you've seen the case studies of folks who have started real early and be able to build their list and be able to grow it and be able to have a really huge grassroots campaign. So in terms of acquisition on digital, on Facebook, Google search, I don't think, if you know you're going to run in 2 years for this seat, why wait, right? Like there, unless unless there's some weird political reason why you can't, which, I can't answer that for you. That's going to be, something else to cover in a different webinar. But if you're looking at winning, right? If you're looking at running for office and winning, what do we talk about? The basics, right? It's about voter contact. It's about listening to the voters. It's about engaging. It's about getting yourself known to this audience. And I think the more time you have to run, the more likely you'll have the resources and infrastructure to win.
I want to add in there that legally, you should really make sure that you have like done what you need to do to open a campaign account before you start running ads. And, like,
yes, all that.
Make sure you're on the level in terms of the law. We're not lawyers.
File. You want to file a lot. There's lots of pieces. You got to make sure you have a lawyer. I just play one on TV, and make sure that you have all the, and compliance as well. Compliance is really huge.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to get even more specific for people thinking about how to plan out if you're going to run, let's say in November 2021. You start doing list building now. You maybe start doing persuasion at what point in the cycle? And then when do you move into mobilization ads? And how do you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different pieces. You know, it depends on whether or not you have a competitive primary. It depends on lots of things. Normally what we suggest is, if you have the resources to be able to do so, you know, start earlier. I think one of the problems that we have still in campaign mode is that the life cycle of a campaign, the life of a campaign cycle has extended, right, because of social media and 24-hour news, etc. But the way that most campaigns operate has not adjusted, and so everyone just spends everything in September and October, which that probably worked in 1992, but that does not work in today's information saturation world that we live in. So, you know, if you have the opportunity to go up on digital, to go up on streaming, to do some targeted ads, start in the summer, start in July, right, and use that to set the tone of the campaign, introducing yourself, your campaign, and also being able to frame your opponent. You know, Barack Obama did it successfully in 2012. He was able to do this to Mitt Romney as he was having a bruising primary campaign. We were able to set the tone and set who Romney is. So if you could start earlier, start earlier. So July, August makes more sense now, rather than just going up, you know, from 0 to 100 right after Labor Day, which is what usually happens.
Tracy Rushing has a really interesting question. Do you have any specific thoughts about videos versus stagnant ads, or like display ads, not display, but like non-video ads?
Yeah, tons of thoughts. Gosh, so many thoughts. So stagnant ads, or we call them static ads. Static ads are great for fundraising purposes, for acquisition purposes. So you really want to focus in on statics. Sometimes videos can work well. I mean, but you know, it has to be like a really good video, right? Or it has to be something that like really knocks it out of the ballpark. Videos are usually better for direct donate ads, which is basically donate now. You know, the urgency is now, the time is now. Like you're creating this urgency, and then you click through and they just donate. But if you want to build your list and you want to have if you want to build that base of grassroots donors and supporters, static ads is probably going to be your best bet. For persuasion, it's the exact opposite, right? Persuasion, static ads don't really be able to convey the message that you're trying to put out there because it's 300 by 250. So for persuasion, you really want to be able to, you want to put out a 6-second, a 15-second, and 30-second video. Now, for a lot of folks, you're like, wait, 6 seconds? That's a thing? Yes, 6 seconds. There's studies and studies and studies, tons of studies that have shown that for most ads, right? And this includes even TV ads, 6 seconds is what you got. That's the amount of time you have to capture someone's attention. And so if you can't do it within if you can't get your message across in 6 seconds, then you know, usually everything goes down from there. Now this doesn't apply to those viral ads where everyone's sharing them, like, oh my God, look at this ad, like, you know, those ads, right? Like everyone's watching you know, those ads because 10, 15 million people have viewed it and shared it. That's a different type of thing. I'm talking about the super majority, 90% of the campaign ads that are out there, you got 6 seconds to get the message across. If you do it 15 or 30, it's after that 6, that's when you want to be able to take advantage, push any additional things that you need. But the momentum needs to be in that first 6.
A little bit of a difference been on paid outreach. Jordan Lander wants to know if you have thoughts on robocalls.
Boy, well, lots of change. You know, I got breaking news on that too. So lots of change. I mean, this is robocalls is a very controversial world. there's a ton of legal here, and this is where you really want to have your legal beefed up, because if you do this badly, you could go to jail. There are people that have gone to jail for it. It's a hard subject. If you don't have the volunteers, right, to be able to make phone calls on your behalf, and you really need to get a robocall out, I think you want to be sure you use it as little as possible. You don't want to use it a lot, and they should be like reminders, right? Like this is not for persuasion. This is not to like identify a voter. No one's like the amount of time you get when someone gets a robocall is like nil. So it should be a reminder, like tomorrow's election day. Today's your next week's your absentee ballot deadline. That's really the most effective way to use robocall. But like 90% of the cases, I usually tell my clients and campaigns, let's focus in and on programming that's going to build the volunteer bases necessary to do voter contact. Because whether it's text banking, phone banking, that in this pandemic world, this is going to be your lifeline. This is how you're going to talk to voters and engage with voters and convert them to be voters for you. So really focusing and putting your energy and time and money into that is much higher ROI activity than spending it on a robocall.
You sort of segued into this, and something I've been thinking about a lot this year, with more people than ever voting by mail. They're going to be sitting with their ballots in front of them on their kitchen counter, and more likely than they would be when they were going in person, Googling the people in front of them, and then folks that they've never heard of, or that they may have seen a direct mail piece, or maybe have knocked on their door once, but for a lot of them, perhaps never heard of. How should a campaign who's further down ballot think about making sure that when somebody Googles them sometime in October with a in front of them, how do they take advantage of the fact that more people are going to be doing that than before?
Yeah, not even just about the candidate, just how to vote. I mean, when you look at Google search history for these primaries, the number one topics are not the candidates. It's literally how to vote. Like, what are the voting rules? Like, when can I send a ballot voter? How can I request a ballot? If I don't get it, what do I do? So these questions are on top of people's minds, and most people do not have the answers right now. Like the actual rules to vote are still being determined. And so this is going to be a hot topic that people are going to be searching for, discussing, etc. So you want to, I brought up Google search in the beginning. Google search, basically what that is when you search for something on Google, right, on google.com, the results pop up. Above the results, there are these sponsored ads that come up. And so what you want to do for your campaign is make sure that for that locality that you're running in, so you can target based on zip codes. You can target the specific zip codes that you want to be able to target. So you want to target that every voter in that area, if they're searching for the election, they're searching for your name, they're searching for how to vote, they're searching what's the way to vote, mail in vote, all these terms. Whenever they're searching that, you want your ad, your search ad, to be on top. You want that to be the number one thing that they see, because that's going to be probably the primary way that most people are gonna get information on how to vote this cycle, is literally searching for the result, which is horrifying. And that's again for another webinar of why that is horrifying, but that's likely to be a major trend this cycle.
I'm going to give one last chance for folks to jump in with any questions. If you have, you can drop them into the Q&A. We'll probably have time for maybe 2 more. But if you have any further questions for Tim, please do ask away. There's lots of things about lots of things. Tim, what do you think is the biggest misconception about online advertising that local campaigns or smaller campaigns get wrong?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's for young people, and even the term young people is a misnomer as well. But the biggest misconception is that, oh well, I should only do digital if I'm trying to target like a college student. The fastest growing audiences on social media are boomers, right? So 40 and over right now. The fastest growing audiences on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. I mean, these audiences are not, they're not college students, they're not high school students. We're talking about suburban moms, we're talking about middle-aged men, we're talking about that prime voting segment, right? So, you know, when you're thinking about digital advertising, like this goes back to the first thing I said, like stop thinking digital versus not digital, because it's all about media, right? It's all media. It's all about advertising comprehensively. And so if you say, okay, I'm trying to reach, you know, these folks, right? And this is my target audience, right? Talk to them, see how they're getting information, see where they're learning, you know, see where they're getting their facts, their news, right? Because when you talk to them, you're probably going to start hearing things and picking up on things like, oh, well, you know, I saw this thing on Facebook, or I saw this thing online that they picked up and I'm sharing it. These are, you know, that's how information is being transmitted today. And so, you know, break that conception in your head that digital is only good to reach, you know, people between the ages of 18 and 21. That might have been true back in 2003. It is not true at all in 2020.
Okay, last question for you, Tim. It's a two-parter. What is the best advice you've ever heard someone give a candidate, or that you've ever given a candidate? And the corollary, what is the worst advice you've ever heard someone give a candidate?
Cool. Best advice. Gosh, I mean, the best advice. You've heard me say it a lot, I think, and you know, I'll say it again. I can't. I think I can't repeat it long enough. Is just use common sense. You know, stop thinking campaigns are these like crazy, like complex rocket science, you know, operations to Mars. They're not. You know, campaigning hasn't fundamentally changed in hundreds of years. And when you go down to the core of what it is, it's communication between one individual to another individual, right? And you take that, you just kind of, you're multiplying that across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or thousands and thousands and thousands. So start at the core of what campaigning is about and what, you know, makes an effective campaign. It's about engaging with voters and moving them and getting them to a place where they want to vote for you, to donate to you, to support you. I've seen candidates, you know, get way too down the rabbit hole of what makes a successful campaign, especially of the local campaigns. The local campaigns are the ones where I see candidates a lot thinking, okay, well, I gotta have this like complex like text banking program set up that's going to cost me $30,000 a month. It's like, if you are not, you know, if you're not raising millions of dollars, then no, that does not make sense. And so, you know, start with the common sense. When you look at it how you look at many things in your own life, and that will solve, you know, a ton of the pain points I think that candidates are going through as to whether or not they think they're running the right campaign or the best campaign possible. You know, there is no such thing as the right campaign. There are best practices. There's, you know, there's things that we know work better than others, but there is no like playbook that has worked for the eons of time that we're talking about. Use best practices though. Use, you know, learn from the experiences of others and use common sense. The worst thing I've heard, gosh, that one actually is harder than the first one because there's so many bad things I've heard in doing this. I feel like I need like a top 10 board. This is probably not the worst thing I've heard, but it's like just like really, like it was really bad. Somebody told me that that digital doesn't work. I mean, that's literally like a sentence that was given. Like, well, no, digital doesn't work. And I'm like, I'm sorry, like, you know, it's like you don't even know how to react to that kind of sentence because there's so many layers and so it's such a bad sentence. And this was told we were in a meeting with the candidate, and this was said by somebody at the table to the candidate, and then they looked at me, and I'm like, I can't, you know, in my head, I'm like, this is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. I don't even know where to start on this and how bad that is or whatever. So I had to then spend like an hour like talking about why that was not right, which was like a complete waste of my hour. And so there's probably way worse things, but that came to mind just because of the topic of this webinar. And if someone ever says something like, if any of the candidates listening, if anyone ever says anything like that to you, like, do not listen to them for like a good 48 hours. Like, put them in timeout. You know, be like, you're in timeout. And once you've learned how bad what you said is, then we can come back and have a normal conversation.
Tim, that's such a good note to end on. I love putting people into timeout. Tim, if people hear from you, have more questions for you, learn more from you, where can they find you?
They can find me at tim@newlcs.com, and happy to answer questions. If you need advice, anything at all, just reach out. I might regret saying that because I'm really bad about turning around emails quickly, as Amanda knows, but I will help you or at least direct you to where I think is helpful. So good luck out there. You know, remember, focus on the goal. What is the goal? Use common sense. Donate to run for something. Donate to run for something. And donate to run for something.
If you want to contribute to us, runforsomething.net/build allows us to keep all these events free. Our next one is August 26th. We're taking next week off for the DNC, the convention. Can't wait. But the week after that, we'll be back with Courtney Tunis from Pantsuit Nation and Supermajority to talk about storytelling and building online community. It is going to be a spectacular conversation, and I can't wait. Until then, thank you, Tim, and thank you everyone who joined both on Facebook and on tonight's Zoom. Have a good evening, everybody.